Now, let me explain why I pick a quite special name. I call it the Great Compression Effect. The reason I pick it is I met a friend who actually told me, he said, Jin, I participated in lots of talks in Hong Kong U. I find them actually quite interesting, and each talk I learned a lot. The only issue is 2 to 3 months later, when I thought about what I had learned, I realized I have almost forgotten. The only exception, in fact, is a talk by a finance professor who actually does asset pricing, Chen Zhiwu. Chen Zhiwu has a particular lecture which can be summarized in a very simple way. He says the following. He says, if you're from the northern part of China, you love power. If you're from the southern part of China, you love money. Now, this is actually, I would say it's not complete because I'm from Shanghai, and I can't tell, should I love money or should I love power? Or maybe as someone from Shanghai, I should love my wife. This is the Shanghai stereotype. So it's not complete, but it's memorable. So many months later, my friends still remember this talk. So I'm going to pick a talk title, Great Compression, so hopefully a few months after this, you still remember it. So that's why I call it the Great Compression Effect. Also, let me mention that this is the last lecture of the day. It has been a long day. We're going to have, of course, a roundtable afterwards. But since this is the last lecture or talk, I will make it a bit more playful and I will tell more stories, perhaps. Before going into the real substance, let me start this quote by Jeff Bezos. Ben Holmstrom mentioned Jeff Bezos in the morning. I was actually his student, so but I didn't coordinate with him. We think alike. So what does Jeff Bezos say? He says that I frequently get a question about what's going to change in the next 10 years. And that's a very interesting question, right? But he said, I almost never get a question, what's not going to change in the next 10 years? And he thinks that is actually the more important of the two because you can build a business strategy around things that do not change. This is how I feel about AI these days. Every day you feel like there is a new model coming up. There's a new application. There's a new agent can do whatever. That gives us, I would say, a lot of anxiety. In fact, some of people even feel there's a little bit of AI exhaustion these days. So instead of talking about what's going to be in 5 years, I think it's always difficult for academics to predict what the future is going to be. I'm going to focus on things that are not changing. So Jeff Bezos went on to say that in 10 years, customers still would like to have goods that are cheap, they love variety, and so on. What's not going to change in organizations hopefully, when we still have people in 10 or 15 years, we still need workers who have skills. We still need workers who are motivated. Okay? So skills and motivation. By the way, if I had more time, I'll also talk about coordination. But actually, that has been covered very well. So I just cover these two. Skills and motivations are permanent topics. While they are permanent topics, we shouldn't think about them as given. As economists, I would say they are the endogenous outcomes. How much skills you have, how motivated workers are. They are the outcomes. And the input, part of the input is the technology. And technology, given by Gen AI, has fundamentally changed, I would call it, the exogenous parameter. So the endogenous outcomes, these skills and these motivations, they will change as well. And the way I think I already see actually lots of commonality, and I'll refer to some of the talks given earlier today, is what I'm going to call this great compression effect. Skills will get compressed, motivations will get compressed. I didn't have time to mention in the slides, but later on I will mention that coordination will get compressed as well. Let me start with skill compression. So this is, by now, it's only published this year, 2025, in QJE, but it's by now a very famous paper by Eric Brynjolfsson, Daniel Lee, and Lisa Raymond. So what they did is they looked at the technical customer support chat, right? So this is one of the top use of Gen AI. So what it does is, in the past, the customer service, real agent, person agent, they need to answer the question. Now, you have an AI agent, you have Gen AI, teach them how to answer questions. Okay, so basically, that's the setting, and these agents, it turns out, can help. This is actually a fairly complex setting. These are the conversations that take about 40 to 50 minutes long, not easy conversations with AI agents. The productivity of the agent, of the real agents, has increased a lot. On average, they have increased 14%. But what I want to highlight here is that the average 14% marked the difference about what we call the heterogeneity effect. So essentially on this graph, what you see is that if you are one of the best agents, your productivity don't increase by that much. If you are one of the bottom 20%, your productivity increase about 35%. And if you are somewhere in the middle, your productivity has increased about 20%. Now, we're in essentially a university environment, so you can think about students in the past, they get 60 out of 100. Now with the AI tool, they get 75. And then the 75 ones go up to 80. So this is the leanings, your agent basically helping your PhD student who can only write 60. Now they actually become 75. Although if they could have done 75, they probably still stay 75 or only go up in 80. So in this sense is that you can think about the skill level dispersion that has been compressed. We help the worst workers most. Related with it, actually, there's also a compression in the speed of skill acquisition. You can roughly think about the blue curve and the green curve as the same. So the horizontal axis here is how long an agent has been with the firm. Okay? So you can see that without AI, that's the blue and the green curve, essentially. When the agent started out, they're not very productive. They answer about 2 questions an hour. And after 10 months, they become skilled agents, experienced agents. They can answer about 3 questions per hour. But with Gen AI, that's the red curve. After 3 months, you become as good as someone who in the past required 10 months of training. So there is an acceleration, or I would call a compression in time in skill development. This is the second compression in terms of skill. Now, what is the implication of this? As a strategy professor, and also does a little bit of management, I think it has a huge impact on the talent pool of the company and how fast they grow. Instead of talking about something abstract, let me give you something more concrete, and that's actually fitting to ask this question. Anyone have any guess about who is the most famous professor at the University of Hong Kong? That's a difficult question. Turns out, I'd like to think the most famous professor in the University of Hong Kong is in my department. If you look at my department's website, there's a guy called Jack Ma, actually. So he's officially listed in my. So why did I actually talk about him? It's because if you look at his interview, he would actually mention when he graduated and he would like to apply for jobs, he applied for this company called KFC, Yum China, in fact. And it ended up, he didn't get the job. Yum China, I was visiting them a few weeks ago, and this is the company that experienced rapid growth. They opened about 1,750 stores in the past. And if you ask yourself, what is the constraint of opening up stores? Chris Pisaridis mentioned that one of the key constraints is to find talent. And if you think about the talent for store manager, that is essentially the job Jack Ma was applying. That was actually a difficult job. Because as a store manager, first, you need to have high EQ. You need to deal with customer complaint. Number two, you need to have leadership. Right? You need to have a lot of subordinates. You need to actually get them to work. Number three, you need to be able to have good quantitative skills to do data analysis because you're going to predict what is the future demand for the customers, and as a result, you are going to decide how much inventory to have. Right? As a result, for each store manager, they really think it's harder to find a store manager than, pick a candidate who can get into Harvard. It's a very difficult job. But now with AI, it's not even Gen AI, what they can do is that AI allows the skill to be unbundled, that is actually mentioned earlier. Now, actually, these individual store managers, they do not need to do prediction about the customer need. This is done by AI. As a result, the number of people they can find who can become store managers have essentially increased by a lot. Moreover, in the past, it takes about 3 to 4 years to train a store manager. Now it takes basically 18 months to do that. So this type of skill compression actually allow the company to grow a lot faster. Related to this, of course, now we don't need store managers who do quantitative analysis. This is the part that I actually disagree with Chris Pisaridis. He thinks that business analytics is very important. I talked to many of the chief technology officers. They think that part is just going to be done by AI. So perhaps actually we don't need that part anymore. But the truth, I'm sure that it has different aspect to it. But if we think that this quantitative skill is no longer so important, then your criteria for picking a store manager is going to be very different. I'd like to say I am, these days it's popular to say I'm an E person or an I person in China. I'm an introvert person, but I'm good in math. But now looking at this result make me very much worry about my future. Maybe kind of the social skill is the more important one. So this is what I have to say about compression in skill. Now let me actually move on to a study that I have been doing, and hopefully we'll have a draft of the paper. I'd like to say this week, but whenever I say this week, probably mean this month also. So this is what we did with the artists. I like to say economists are always not so cool, so we want to be with the cool people. And the cool people are the artists. So we actually recruited about 200 artists and look at how Gen AI changed the way they create art. So the traditional method, again, Lining mentioned it, it's a little bit of a 20-80 here, right? You spend 20% of the time thinking about what I'm going to draw, and then you spend another 80% of time to do the details. That is pre-Gen AI. Then we give these artists a Gen AI tool. And then basically what they need to do is just input a few prompts. These are in Chinese, so my apology for that, but it basically says British-style architecture, circular staircase, and so on. So after you actually input these prompts, immediately this app is similar to Midjourney. It's going to generate a few pictures for you. One very unique feature of our study is that we video record the entire creation process. By doing that, we're able to trace out what an economist is going to call a quality curve. what is a quality curve? Essentially, the more time you spend on something, right, the quality typically increase over time. The blue curve here is the quality curve before you use AI. And the red curve is what we find out what happens once you use AI. Now, by looking at this quality curve, we can actually discover two aspects of technology. One is what we call the direct effect. The direct effect basically says by how much time you spend, what quality level you can achieve. And looking at the direct effect, you see that Gen AI has a very positive direct effect, boosts up the productivity. But does it mean it actually increases final quality? The answer is that not obvious. Let's say that before Gen AI, we are at this curve, point A. Okay? Now, with Gen AI, you might go to this point B, which has higher quality, saves some time. You can go to this point C, which is actually even higher quality, but more time. Or you can actually go to this point D, which is less time, but also lower quality. So the final quality can drop. So what we say is that technology is this curve, and the human factor is to decide where on this curve you're going to be. Let me mention that this is a research I did, actually benefited me personally. So I'm going to share this story with you. Since this is the last talk, I'm going to share a personal story. For some of you, I know that you have actually gone to Hong Kong U, and we have a we call it 15th floor, which is a senior common room, the British-style cafeteria for faculty members. It's a nice cafeteria, nice restaurant, good food in general, heavily subsidized, with one exception. The exception is that the steak there, if you tell them, I want a medium rare steak, they give you a well-done steak. You tell them, I want a rare steak, they give you a well-done steak. So that's for whatever reason. So we actually, in the end, never order the steak. But one day actually, I made a mistake. I made a mistake not by ordering steak, but by ordering fish. That day is a day of typhoon. In Hong Kong, we get a lot of typhoon, and that day, essentially, this restaurant became one of the few that is open on campus. So it's actually very busy. When the chef is very busy, and you order fish, sometimes it can be a bad idea, because the fish I get is raw. It's undercooked. Because you know that the chef is busy, so they give you something raw. But this gave me an idea, especially I was doing this research at the time. So about half a year ago, I have a former colleague, James Kong, returned from Melbourne, and we went to the same cafeteria. And this time, I ordered steak. And James was looking at me, say, Jin, don't you know that whenever you order steak, you get something well done? I say, I know that. But that day, if you look at the restaurant, it's very busy. It's very busy. That means that the chef is in a rush. And once the chef is in a rush, they're not going to cook very long in the steak. And this is the first time ever I get a medium rare steak in that restaurant. So what am I trying to say using this example? If you think about where people will be on this curve, it has to do with the marginal return to time. Okay? When people are very busy, restaurant chefs want to stop early. But if you look at this graph, after AI, the slope of the curve has become flattened, the red curve. Once it has become flattened, what it means that it makes very little sense to spend more time on it. So they are going to stop earlier. I'm going to use a Chinese term for that, as these are people are 理性摸鱼人. So what this means, they are the rational shirkers. So if you look at the time these artists spent pre-AI, artists are actually interested. We give them 150 minutes to do things. Most of them actually finish at 150. A few of them actually continue to draw, even if we tell them they should stop. But after AI, there is a new bump at the 60-minute, which is basically where the return to time goes to zero. So a lot more people stop early, and about 30% of the illustrators, they actually produce lower quality work. So the direct effect of productivity in this case is smaller than the indirect effect of motivation. And this is what we call it the curse of the 80s. Come to the 80s again. In the past, I don't know, many of you are professors here. This year, I don't know how your experience is in grading the homework of your student. I find it very difficult. Because in the past, we get a lot of people who are in the 60s. Now we don't see such people anymore. They all become 80s because of the skill compression. However, another thing is that I don't find many people who are in 85 either. That actually makes sense because if you spend 5 minutes to a project, you can get 80. Why do you want to bother to spend another 2 hours just to get 5 additional points? So as a result, you actually see a lot of compression in outcome. What type of implication does it have? Let me quickly talk about this. One of the things I think actually has been echoed by many speakers today is I suspect the middle is going to vanish. In the future, we're going to have a lot of 80s. We're going to have a few 95, but 85 or 90 may disappear. And then as a firm, you need to pick your strategy. Do you want to go for quality, which is 95, or you go for quantity? If you decide to go for quality, then you want to really think about how to motivate your workforce. Maybe you need to get people who are more intrinsically motivated. But more interestingly is perhaps you only want to get 80. Again, let me use Yum China as an example. A few weeks ago when I visited them, I say, what is the most exciting things happening in Yum China? And they told me that the most exciting program they have is something called a MEGA. My first response is, you are also doing Making America Great Again? Turns out it's not the case. What they have is something called a mega store manager. So in the past, they have one store manager, one store. Now on average, one store manager manage 2.5 stores. The best store manager manage 5 stores. They also told me that in the past, they think they prefer one, the Chinese is called 诸葛亮, a really smart person, over, in the past they prefer 三个臭皮匠, which is the 3 not so good people, over one really top talent. Now they actually prefer these super managers. So you can actually see that once you change your organizational form, even if talent gets compressed, if you change your organizational form, these top talent, you can better leverage their skill. I know that I'm way over time, so let me finish here, but mentioning that we see a lot of compression here. Skill compression is at some level a good thing. That's an upward productivity push. However, we also see motivation compression, which is a negative productivity push. However, if you actually change your organizational form, then what you get is go from compression to dispersion. If you actually just still have one store manager, one store, this store manager gets very bored after 22 hours or so. This is basically after 60% of the time, you don't know what actually they're doing. But if you leverage it well, you see a lot of dispersion. Thank you.